Law of Human Rights was presented for adoption by the General Assembly of the United Nations, Eleanor Roosevelt described it as the Magna Carta of the future. What was that an appropriate comparison, why or why not?
As stated in,
I'm talking, I got it, yeah, sorry. Okay. Go.
as stated in the Magna Carta, to no one will we refuse of delay of right or justice. The ideals of fundamental rights, due process, and justice are reflected in the Magna Carta, the Universal Declaration of Rights, and our Bill of Rights. We believe that the Magna Carta is an appropriate comparison to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
In 1215, King John signed the Magna Carta, intended to limit the power of monarchy by granting rights to nobles. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights intended to guarantee fundamental rights for all people globally. Both differ in application, yet embody John Locke's social contract's claim that government must protect the inalienable rights of the people and adhere to limits placed on the government by the people.
There are three main parts of the Magna Carta that can be found in Articles 9, 10, and 17 of the Universal Declaration: due process, separation of church and state, and property rights. Our Bill of Rights protects separation of church and state in the First Amendment, as well as due process and property rights in Amendments 4 through 8. State constitutions also protect these rights, such as Section 8 of Nevada's state constitution. Today, these are still considered some of the most inalienable, important, protected rights.
We do not believe any of the UDHR's aspirational goals need to be added to our Constitution. While many of the rights in the UDHR are found in our Bill of Rights, they are often established through judicial review, congressional legislation, and laboratories of democracy. For example, Articles 41 and 42 of the Magna Carta, as well as Article 13 of the UDHR, establish the right to travel in and out of a country.
This is not found in the United States Constitution. However, it was established in Supreme Court cases Kemp v. Dulles and Graham v. Richardson. Our unique system of federalism created by the 10th Amendment allow for laboratories of democracy.
As stated by Justice Louis D. Brandeis in the Supreme Court case New State Ice Company v. Liebman, a single creative state may serve as a laboratory and try social and economic experiments without risk to the rest of the country. This can be seen with the legalization of marijuana in Colorado, and before the current Supreme Court case aiming to overturn DOMA, states were able to decide marriage terms.
Although the UDHR's provisions may be too idealistic to be realized today, it has the potential to revolutionize the views on human dignity and liberty the way the Magna Carta did. The Magna Carta was essentially ignored for almost 400 years, but it is seen as the first greatest step towards limited government today.
The UDHR is unenforceable because of the UN's veto rules, financial issues, lack of enforcement, and hesitancy to overstep a nation's sovereignty. While the UDHR can be compared to the Magna Carta, there are issues with the integrity of the document. Nations that sign the Universal Declaration often fail to uphold the rights protected in it, such as China's infringement of free speech found in Article 19.
The neoconservative movement in the United States demonstrates even our hesitancy to truly committing to the document. The pretense in signing the UDHR turns it into more of a suggestion than a revolutionary declaration.
The UDHR has the potential to revolutionize the views on human liberty the way the Magna Carta did. As Youth Ant, the UN Secretary General in the 1960s said, "The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was born of an increased sense of responsibility. The world has come to a clear realization that freedom, justice, and world peace can only be assured through international promotion of these rights." Thank you.
338.
How long is it?
338.
Sweet.
You're under, so it's, hey, I don't think being under is necessarily bad. If you're at 3 minutes, then yeah, but if you're close to 4, I don't think it's a problem.
That gives us a little bit to add, because I know our highlighting parts were really weird this time around,
Yeah.
because we had to cut out so much,
Let's do
so.
that. Yeah, wouldn't add too much, but to what extent should we protect positive rights under the Constitution as opposed to negative rights? What is the difference between a positive right and a negative right?
A positive right is something that the government is told to do for the people, while a negative right is something the government is prevented from doing.
And to what extent should we protect positive rights under the Constitution?
Well, according to the social contract, John Locke's social contract specifically, protection of life, liberty, and property is one of the most important fundamental rights, which could be considered a positive right. So the government has the responsibility to protect those in order to be considered a legitimate government.
How should life, liberty, and property be protected? What should government proactively do to protect violations of people's life, liberty, or property?
One of the ways that we do protect this is under the Fifth Amendment, in which we say that, for example, eminent domain, we are with the fact that they can't take away your property without just compensation for it, and then also the protection of life and liberty, which is outlined in the Fifth Amendment through the due process rights.
I think one of the key protections we have is our use of litigation in the Supreme Court. If you feel that these rights are infringed upon, you can appeal to the government and use that as a way to change policies the government is doing.
Additionally, legislation through state legislatures as well as Congress can be used to create laws that protect rights, such as like the Civil Rights Act in 1964, which was used to protect positive rights of the people.
Also, there are two different kinds of rights that people can get. There's the difference between the civil right, which is in the 13th and 14th Amendment, and then there's a political right, which is seen in the 15th and 19th Amendment.
Okay. What principles were Chinese demonstrators advocating when they passed out copies of the Declaration of Independence in Tiananmen Square in 1989?
I actually saw a picture of this, and it was this guy was holding the Declaration of Bill of Rights in front of this big massive machine, and it goes to show that a paper can be stronger than any mass weapon that you may have.
Attention staff, we have a red BMW in the north parking lot that's blocking a construction gate. A red BMW in the north parking lot blocking a construction gate. We need to have it moved immediately. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that.
We have it on tape forever.
And the political right that the Chinese students were trying to protest was the freedom of speech to the government, because of the fact that the government was oppressing their rights to be able to speak publicly against and protest the government.
And additionally, with the Declaration of Independence, they're advocating the idea that when a government doesn't protect the rights of its people, the people have the right to overthrow the government or change the government, which was something that we did through the revolution with that Declaration of Independence.
Do you think that one of the rights expressed in UDHR is effectively the right of every person to gain full employment, basically the right to have a job? Number one, do we have a right to a job? And number two, should we have a right to a job?
You do not have a right to a job. You have the right of equal protection in the 14th Amendment. You have the equal protection to seek a job. There can't be any discriminations. However, there is no system of checking that every citizen or person under a jurisdiction has employment.
And I think in a capitalist society like we have, it's hard to ensure that so many people are going to have jobs, and it's really unrealistic to say that, and it would cause difficulties for us to enforce that. So I think the important thing, like Annie said, is the fact that everyone has equal protection to get a job, and if you're somebody with a disability or if you are a different ethnicity, then you still have the same protection and the same opportunity as somebody who doesn't.
This is where it creates that gray area between equal opportunity. For example, someone who doesn't have the same economic stability as somebody else would have different opportunities when, let's say, going to find a physician or a doctor. And so that's where that right of opportunity and the right of, for example, work comes in and would infringe on that.
Go ahead.
Going off of that, do we have, and should we have, a fundamental right to a quote-unquote quality education? And until when?
Did you say quality or equality?
Quality.
How would you define quality
Yeah, I'm
education?
asking you to define
Would
quality.
you repeat or like rephrase your question?
I will
my
as soon as
gosh.
that's over.
Once again, all personnel in the building, we have a red vehicle, it's a BMW that's blocking a construction gate in the north parking lot, we need to have that vehicle moved immediately or it may be towed. Anyone in the building who is the owner of a red BMW parked in the north parking lot, we need to have that vehicle moved immediately. Students, construction personnel, staff, anyone in the building that might be the owner of a red BMW parked in the north parking lot, it's blocking a construction gate and must be moved immediately.
What were we
I
talking
think
about?
I think
Okay,
it's
alright,
a
I'm
red
gonna re-ask the
BMW.
question.
Yeah, what do you think?
Do you have a right to a red BMW? I'm sorry. Do you have a right, and if not, should you have a right to a, quote, quality education?
Under the Supreme Court case Plyer v. Doe, the Supreme Court ruled that even people that are not citizens of the United States have the right to an elementary education. So at least at that point, yes, all people have that opportunity, because without an education, you do not have the equal opportunity as those that can get an education.
And even going further, even today, our public education would be considered a quality of education because through that you're still able to go to further levels of schooling. So we each have that opportunity of a quality of education through the fact that we have the public schooling.
And looking back to the foundation of our Constitution, classical republicanism was a huge aspect, or it was a huge part in the founding of our nation. And you get you get education through going to school. So having quality education available to everyone is essential.
However, sometimes your place in the environment can affect the quality of education you receive. And this was seen, I saw this on TV in 2009 when Oprah made two schools of very different environments switch to see how their environment was. And one school was very poorly, in a poor neighborhood, and they had to go through searches, they had like bad books, while the other school was really rich and they got a lot more things for their education. So even though the quality is equal, the environment in which the school is also affects it.
Yeah, we did it.
That's good, yeah.
I gave you much extra time.
Yeah. Go ahead, feedback?
Oh, yeah, great, work together